How did you even get into real estate? Like you were like, I'm going to go get in this crazy world and try to become a millionaire.
Going back to 1982, I bought my first muscle and fitness magazine, and it had Arnold Schwarzenegger on it. And I started working out, and I read about Arnold and that he made his wealth through real estate. And so that really was the beginning of my thinking about real estate.
Tim Pikey's journey is a blueprint for turning vision into vast wealth in real estate's toughest niches.
Starting with a foreclosure auction in 2002, flipping deals with sheer determination, and now owning 25 mobile home parks through creative financing and relentless hustle.
And so I started doing multiple deals, getting like 5.25 or 5.5 rate on a 15 or 20 year AM. And I restructured debt for all of these communities that were seller financed.
I got to ask you this. When you're looking at a mobile home park to acquire, what is your formula that you're using to look at it and say, okay, is this a good deal or not?
What's going on, Rounders? Welcome to the Real Estate Boyz Podcast and radio show. I'm your host, Andrew Jobe, joined by Mr. J.R. Reed. How you doing, J.R.?
Great.
Man, with this show today, we're kind of taking a little turn. We're going and talking about mobile home parks.
Yeah, we've got a very special guest, a guy that knows a lot about mobile home parks. Maybe somebody that knows the most about mobile home parks in Houston. We don't know. We're about to find out. But we've got none other than Tim Pikey from Park Nation. This guy owns, I think, 25 mobile home parks. Yeah,
That's correct.
And you own Park Nation, which is a mobile home park property management company that focuses on being more efficient and shoring up processes within mobile home parks to make them more profitable.
That's correct.
So we can't wait to dive into your story, Tim, and let the Rounders, who are our listeners, that's what we call them, the Rounders,
Got it.
learn everything that they can from your story, and maybe they'll want to start using your mobile home park management company after this too.
Yeah, hopefully so.
Yeah, hopefully. That's the goal, right?
Yeah, so I purchased my first mobile home park in 2007.
Okay.
Is that where you want to start?
No, we want to go back.
Okay.
How did you even get into real estate? Like you were like, I'm going to go get in this crazy world and try to become a millionaire through what everybody says is the way to do it.
Going back to 1982, I bought my first muscle and fitness magazine, and it had Arnold Schwarzenegger on it.
Yeah.
I may have just butchered his name, but he was like an idol when I was a kid, and I started working out from that magazine. I actually was like 12 at the time, and I started working out, and I read about Arnold and that he made his wealth through real estate. And so that, really was the beginning of my thinking about real estate. And ever since I had thought as a child, I was like, I want to build. Like the number one word in my brain and my heart was build. And so as I grew older and I thought about college, it was either to be an architect or to be an engineer because I didn't want to just start a building company, because I worked construction like when I was 13, and I'm like, I didn't want to start a company by having a truck and a ladder and some tools in the back of my truck. I wanted to start it from a different, perspective. I can remember I was building a gas station working for a construction company as a teenager, and I was digging a big pit or something, and this guy pulls up with a tie and drawings and gets out and talks to my supervisor, and I'm like, wow, that's who I want to be.
The guy that just shows up to check on the hole.
Yeah, I just don't. Yeah, exactly. And so, and I saw how tired those guys were and how their skin was withered from working out in the weather. And I'm like, man, I love to build, but I don't want to be that guy, because they're 50 years old. I didn't want to be out there, slinging sheets of decking and all that sort of thing. So I'm like, I'm going to go to school and get an education. And so I went to the library, and I'm like, I looked, and honestly, I've always loved math. And I'm like, what's more difficult if an architect or an engineer? And an architect has to take Calculus 1, an engineer has to take Calculus 1, Calculus 2, Calculus 3, and differential equations. And because of that, that was one of the reasons I chose engineering versus architecture.
You're like, let's choose the hardest thing.
Let's choose the hardest path. And that's exactly what my life has been. I'm always choosing the hardest path. And I think, if you're an investor, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to get into mobile home parks, like there was a kid that I talked to recently, 24, 25 years old, that wants to buy his first mobile home park. And somehow he knows the brother-in-law of one of my minority members, a really bright guy, and he's like, "Hey, can you talk to this kid and see about, help, guide him in getting involved in this business?" And so, it's a difficult business, and it's because of the complexity of managing these communities, and most of them are owned by mom and pops and
For sure.
and investors that don't necessarily know how to optimize or make them run efficiently. And now there's a lot in the last probably even 10 years, things have changed, and there's a lot more people coming into this business. And of course that's driven the prices way up beyond,
For sure.
like, they don't even make sense anymore, especially in Texas.
It's getting wild. Well, hold on. Before we get there.
Okay. So going back, so I chose to go get a degree in engineering, and I went on and got a degree, and a civil engineering degree from the University of Missouri in Rolla. It's a great engineering school. And I when I got out of school, you're poor for so long, is like, like putting $2 in the gas tank. I'm like, I want to go make money. So I got a job. And that really, deterred me from actually doing what I want, and that is to build. And I can remember, after I got my first job, I went to Alaska, and I worked several months in Alaska and made some good money. And then I came back to St. Louis, and I bought my first house, and I was like 24, and I bought my first home. And I remember I had some roommates, and I opened up a book and I started drawing out my vision, and I wanted to buy single family homes in downtown St. Louis, and rehab them, live in one, and then buy another one, and then either sell it or lease it, and grow a portfolio of income producing assets. I think back then I had the Carlton Sheets, like cassette tapes. Do you remember?
Oh, yeah.
That was probably before your time, maybe.
I know who he is, though.
Yeah. And I was, starting to learn about real estate, and I wanted to create passive income. And but I was distracted because I was working full time, and I wanted to get my PE license, which took a lot longer than I expected. I mean, it took me 7 years after I graduated to get my engineer's license, which, it's really great to have. But when it comes to being an entrepreneur or, doing deals, it's completely irrelevant. So I kind of hindsight, my whole 20s, I was and I was not really focused on target, and my actions that I was taking was not really producing the results that I really wanted in life. And then I was like sitting here in my 30s, and I just kind of came to myself, and I'm like, man, I gotta to start actually taking action. And I had moved to Texas by then and was living in an apartment. I had a Harley Davidson, and I would drive it into my living room, and I kept it inside my apartment. And I'm sitting on the couch looking at that Harley Davidson. I'm like, what am I doing? I just kind of had an epiphany, and I decided to sell it. And I was working for an engineering company at the time, and I actually absolutely hated it. I would spend a lot of time looking for foreclosure properties. And, before I came to Texas, that's one of the things I was doing. I was starting to look at foreclosure properties really in the downtown area.
What year was this?
This was in like 1996, 95, 96.
Okay.
And where in Texas are you?
Currently.
At this time, at 96.
Oh, I moved to Houston.
Down to Houston? Okay.
Yeah, I was actually working for an underground tunnel contractor, and we had a big contract with the city of Houston, their wastewater side, and I was going to manage 16,000 linear feet of underground tunnel, and it was for a 1-year contract. And once I got down here, I didn't really want to leave, and I'm glad I didn't. They were going to send me to California next, and so I, kind of came to myself looking at that Harley Davidson. I'm like, man, I better do something. So I started going to every Tuesday, like the first Tuesday of the month, they have these foreclosure auctions with Harris County, and started learning my way around the language and how to get information, and back then it was on film, like I can't remember that. What's it? The film called?
The Microfiche or whatever?
Microfiche, yeah, thank you.
You had to go to the library to
the fourth floor of whatever building downtown. I had it, very well memorized, and all the different. There was publicans.com, I believe, was the website that managed the information about the foreclosures. And I met the owners of those guys, and I really dug in, and I started learning about how to buy properties, foreclosure properties. Unfortunately, in Houston, there's a lot of opportunity, but if you buy a foreclosure property, there's a right of redemption period, and you can't get a title to write a title policy on those. And there's a 2 and 4 year period. So that was a challenging time. But my very first deal, it was like a Tuesday, and I took off work, and I went to this foreclosure, and I'd sold my Harley Davidson, but I did not have the guy that was going to buy it. He was going to take the money out of his thrifty account, his retirement account, but I guess he didn't get it out in time, or it was stalled. And so I went ahead and went to the auction thinking that I'm going to have cash, but I didn't have cash. And I found 3 deals. I had homed in on 3 different deals, and one of them was on East 32nd and Half Street, which was on the north side of 610 and East Independent Heights, and the other one was inside the Loop. And a lot of times, they're really good deals. Have you ever been to those?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Those foreclosures. A lot of good deals. A lot of high taxes are owed, and they get paid off like the day before, the day of, and,
For sure.
and your deal that you think you're going to be able to bid on is gone. And so the auctions are, back then they're crazy. I mean,
There still are. They still are.
They still are?
They still are to this day, yeah. It's pretty wild. Hundreds of people go to that thing. It's not like you can just show up and get a deal just by showing up. Like, if you don't know what you're doing, you're not gonna have any kind of success there.
Yeah. So it was May of 2002 when I went to this foreclosure auction, and there's a particular house it was on 32nd and Half that I liked, and it was built in like the early 1900s. I remember taking a big old sink, like a cast iron sink. And I should have kept it and sold it, but I think I just threw it out. But it had like 1925 stamped on it.
Nice.
And but so I didn't have any cash, and I met this lady like next to me. I said, "Look, I've done my homework, and if you buy one of these 3 houses," and the one that I really liked came up first, and she bid on it, and she it was like there was bidding at like, I don't know, $10,000 or something like that, and I think she bought it for $14,000. And
so she bought the house based on a tip from you,
Yes.
and she had just met you.
Just met me.
Wow.
And that's the magic of doing real estate. I learned over the years is you can meet people, and if you're on, like, if you're really leaning in and you're standing for something, and you really believe that you can do it, then whatever you don't have, whether it's money or the deal or some resource, will come up, will show up for will show up for you
For sure.
just when you need it. And it's kind of like the creative process. You don't know what you don't know, and then you start moving down that path, and something amazing happens. And also there's resistance too. Like, whatever you stand for, there's always resistance. Like, and I believe that whatever your vision is, whatever you're doing that's outside the norm, that takes a vision and effort and concentration, there's going to be equal and opposing forces.
Always.
And you have to be willing to stand in the face of your own doubt and fear and those obstacles and overcome them to get deals done. And once you build your threshold, then it doesn't matter how many zeros is behind the number. I mean, it doesn't matter how big the deal is. It's the same concept. And
It's just beating the resistance and making sure you can have the mindset to beat the resistance.
I stayed at that auction for 4 hours. I was miserable because the deal that she wanted was she had a a tract of land off of Aldine Westfield, an all Hispanic area. And she wanted the corner of this big tract she had. And there was some Arabic folks that had a gas station across the street and some Hispanic folks. They all wanted this tract of land. And they kept bidding on this. At 4 hours into the very last deal that auctioned off was what she wanted. And it went up and up and up to the point she didn't have enough cash to pay for it. But she was determined to get it, which I love that kind of determination. And then she didn't have enough money to pay for it. And so she turned around and wrote a personal check for the balance to this guy that had cashier's checks so she could pay everything in cash. So she was making deals as well. I mean,
trying to get her deal done.
Yeah, trying to get her deal done. And so we left and went to a little barbecue restaurant there off of, I think, Memorial or Woodway or whatever. And I drew my first hand promissory note. And I learned hard and fast how to do promissory notes and how to I've studied hundreds of promissory notes.
But right there, that was your first one in a barbecue restaurant.
And so she wanted like, I think she got it for $11,000. She wanted $16,000 for it, or something like that. And I had the guy that was going to buy the Harley Davidson had brought the cash. It was like, I don't know, $15,000. It wasn't a lot of money, like $15,000 or something, maybe 20. And I gave her $5,000. And I remember the note was for $11,000 at 10% interest. I can't remember the other terms, but it was a short-term note. And that enabled me to get in title and start working. And I went to a bank, and the bank initially said that they would fund the rehab of this project. But then they found out about the right of redemption,
Yep.
And in this case, it was 4 years.
Because it was somebody's homestead or something like that.
Yeah, and there are those types of deals, a lot of times there can be hairy because of all the different
For sure.
liens. And they're not necessarily cleared out after the foreclosure.
Of course not.
They
might still be living there.
Well, no, not that.
Okay.
So, and I have to apologize because my voice is very weak today.
You're good.
So I started working the house, and I'm like Discover card, American Express, a Home Depot card. I started using all my credit cards, and then I wound up borrowing more money from her. I borrowed like $35,000 from her.
The lady that gave you the loan to buy the property.
In small draws at 10%. And so I think when the deal was done, and I started going to Lifestyles Unlimited I think Dale Walmsley was the guy.
Yep.
And I think the other guy that was from back then I met, he has a radio show now. I can't remember his name, but he's on every Sunday, I think.
Okay.
And so I met a mortgage broker, which turned out to be a very good friend of mine over the years. That he's a banker, had his own mortgage company. He was also an investor in storage units. So we became friends. And what he was doing, it was the first one we did was a rehab home, and he basically gave me a mortgage for it. So there was no debt against the deed. So I took it and got it appraised for like $115,000. So I cashed out and I got a wire for $89,000 in my account.
After you paid off this lady?
No, I didn't pay her off yet.
Okay.
I just, because the title was clear, I took it using, this guy's company. He found a mortgage for it and put a mortgage against it. And so I cashed out for the equity and got $89,000 wire into my bank account. I'm like, wow, that's my first real estate deal, and I was super excited and I'm like, what am I going to do? And so I did the right thing. I went and I wrote Alice a check for $48,000, and which was her principal and interest for that money in the time period. And I paid off all the credit cards. And then that was my first deal. And then the next deal, there was a burned house down the street, on the same street, 32nd and a half, for for like $8,500, and it was the parents. You know, this is a rough neighborhood back then. The parents had the son was smoking crack or something and burned the house down.
Gosh.
And so they wanted to sell it. So I bought it for like, I don't know, $4,500 or something. And I tore it down in 4 hours. I had a crew with the skid steer loader and grapples and their own, dump trucks. Tore it down in 4 hours, and I built my first new house in 3 months.
So you finally became the builder that you always wanted to be.
Yes, I was so excited, right? I mean, it's just like a 13 or 1,400 square foot house with cool porches on the front and back, and I was like, again, doing the hard thing, like going the hard way versus buying an existing home for $50,000 or $60,000 and putting $5,000 or $10,000 of improvements and then either flipping it or leasing it. I was building, I'm like, okay, I'm going to build a reproducible asset versus buy, but I didn't know how hard it would be to get lots and get financing and to do all that sort of thing. I had found an architect that I was working with to build homes, and the financing component, like, the first house that I built in 3 months, I leased it within 30 days.
Nice.
But then it took nine months to get the financing on it. So, from start of the project to restructuring debt, and then I was borrowing notes from Alice. Now I developed a relationship with Alice, and I started taking like $10,000 or $15,000 draws, and I had set up a construction company, and then I had set up my first entity that owns assets and manages cash flow, which of course I have lots of those now, but.
Man, Alice was a godsend for you, wasn't she?
Well, again, whenever you step out, and you do something that's out of the ordinary, that's kind of against the grain, I think that the universe will look at that and say, hey, man, I'm going to help you out. Yeah. And that's what happened. I mean, I went there to that auction with determination and with certainty that I'm going to do a deal, but I didn't have any cash.
And you did one.
And I did one. And that's what it takes. It's like over the years, especially being in the business I'm in, when I look at a deal, like I take ownership mentality before I ever close. Sometimes before I even write the contract, like I want to have that mindset where I own it. And I think that's a powerful thing that kind of drives you through the process of doing your due diligence and underwriting and all that sort of thing. I mean, I think one of the books I read, maybe it was Robert Kiyosaki, or maybe it was another book that's like you have to look at 100 deals, write 10 contracts, and you close one deal. Yeah. Have you heard that?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Where'd you hear that from?
I have no idea, but it's a good rule of thumb though. Like it takes a lot of offers.
I think it was Carlton Sheets said that.
Okay.
It's been reproduced because I remember hearing that on what's the now Carl Sheets of Bigger Pockets today. That's kind of the information source.
Yeah, that's kind of a rule of thumb. And so 9 months into that deal, I restructured debt with the same, mortgage broker that we still do business today. I mean, he's actually working for a bank, and we've done tons of deals over the last 20 plus years. And so the second check I wrote to Alice was for, I was like $78,000. So it was interesting deals. I restructured debt. It was appraised for like 115 or something like that. I cashed out and I put like $2,500 in my pocket, and I paid her the balance of the project.
For your new home that you had.
And I had my first really cash flow asset, I restructured debt. My payment was like $550. I leased it for $950, and I put $2,500 in my pocket.
And you were building to rent.
I was building to rent. My vision was to build 2 or 3 houses at one time, and then sell 1 or 2, and keep 1 or 2, depending on how it worked out, as an asset on the balance sheet to create passive income, and then take capital that I made through profit and move to either apartments or commercial real estate. retail centers because I had an interest in, building a portfolio of real estate or of retail centers. So, but that I can later on down the timeline, I'll tell you that didn't work out so well. So that first deal that I built went very well. And so the next project was 2005, and I wanted to build I thought, well, I'll build a bigger house, but the bigger house cost more, and the numbers didn't work out so well. So I had trouble trying to lease that one out and make the numbers work to restructure debt and put debt against it. So I think I wound up selling that one, or trying to sell that one. So it's been a long road. The single families helped get started in the business, but then in 2007 is when the market, for me, is when the bubble busted in this sector of real estate, and I couldn't sell homes because they couldn't get financing.
Yeah.
At
Okay.
that price point.
We're going to take a quick break here and hear from our sponsor. And then on the backside, we'll hear from Tim, how he got into the mobile home park business, how he got out of the bubble bursting in the single family, and all about Park Nation.
Welcome back, Rounders. Sitting here with Tim, learning about his story and the struggles and just the endurance going through single-family homes. But just now getting into the exciting stuff of the bubble, coming out of the bubble and moving into mobile home parks.
So in 2007, I was still working full-time as an engineer for S&B Engineers. And I worked basically 4 days a week, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. And honestly, I wasn't the greatest employee because some days I'd tell, one of my buddies, hey, go open my office, turn the light on, and put a cup of coffee on my desk. And I'll be there as soon as I get there. I mean, because at lunchtime, I was running and checking jobs and writing checks to vendors, and I'd run back to work, and it was crazy.
That's a pretty good schedule, though. The 7 to 3 is a perfect schedule if you're going to be in a side hustle.
I think I had at that time, 7 bank. I had a bunch of bank accounts, and wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and start, signing checks and paying bills, and being an accountant and all that. I mean, I was a turnkey operation. I would do all the acquisitions, all the land acquisitions, all the design, all the building, all the marketing, all the sales. And I'd be at work and I'd be calls from, leads, looking to, and I learned that back then they had the green sheet, and you put it, the way you write an ad, you don't give the address, you just say the nearest intersection, and you always put individual at the end. And I'd put some highlights and put my number, and I'd say, and I learned this, drive by the house and drive by the neighborhood. If you like the house and you're okay with the neighborhood, call me back, and then I'll meet you, because they would never meet you on the first encounter. You have to make sure they drove by first, and then on the day that on the second time, the day they have an appointment with you, you have to verify they're going to come, because a lot of times even they don't.
These are buyers for your house?
Sellers. I mean, renters. Sorry, renters. Yeah.
Okay.
So in 2007, I was going to build 10 houses. I was leaning in, I'm going to do 10 houses while I work full time. And, that's a lot of work to acquire the land and, clear the land and then get a design done, get the permits, the permits. It was in the floodplain too. So the floodplain management component was a whole other hairy monster I had to deal with. And so I built 2 homes. I started on 2 more, and I was, really making good progress. But then something happened to the first 2 homes. I had buyers, but their underwriting kind of instantaneously kind of fell out on what's going on. And that was the beginning of when the bubble, for those adjustable rate mortgages just busted.
Financial crisis.
Yeah, the big financial crisis. And I was right at my home building business was took the brunt of it. It just annihilated, that
terrible
business.
Time to be a small home builder.
Yeah. Especially when you want to change the world, you know? And so, towards the end, but it's, all things are working together for the good. And I had built those relationships, and instead of having, capital from my asset, selling assets, I had access to capital through promissory notes. Right. And so,
and through relationships that you'd built along the way.
And so this lady, Alice, God rest her soul, because I think she's gone. She had her neighbor's son passed away. He was 38 years old. He owned a landscaping company, and he owned a mobile home park. And she's like, go down there and meet, her name was Diane Byers. And she's like, go down there and meet Diane. It was her neighbor. And they lived over in like the Spring Valley area. And so I went down there and I met Diane, and she wanted to sell this mobile home park for like $325,000 or something like that, $350,000. And so I went over to this property and I'm like, wow, it's rough. This is rough. It was
different animal. 24
spaces on 5 acres, built in the early '60s, on a septic system. Had a water well, and it was a unique animal. I mean, but I'm, was not even slightly afraid of it. I just saw dollar signs. Right, I'm like, okay, we're gonna, and buy this asset and really start growing, my balance sheet. And
you had the right mindset, like grow the balance sheet, like whatever we got to do.
Yeah, whatever you got to do to grow the balance sheet with assets that are, producing cash. And so I actually went to this guy that I'd been doing business with for these mortgages, and I said, hey, can I get a loan on this deal? And he said no. And but he said, go down the street. It was on Aldi. This is on Aldi in Westfield, which is really back then was a really rough area.
For sure.
There's a guy by the, I can't remember the guy's name, but he was a chiropractor, and he had this building that my friend was actually carrying a hard money loan on, and he said, go ahead and buy that building from him. And so I'm okay. So I go down there and I meet this chiropractor, and he was kind of like a used car salesman. Like if he's talking, he's lying. And so I worked a deal with this guy where I basically, he wanted a certain amount for the property, and the differential between the loan amount and that amount was, I don't know, like $90-something thousand. And so I said, look, I'll give you half of that in cash, and you finance the rest for me in a short-term note. And so he did the deal, right? I mean, so like this hard money loan was like 12%. And I had a great relationship with the banking, with the lender. And
so you go to the chiropractor. The chiropractor has a hard money loan against this property
with my mortgage broker,
and he's like, "Hey, go buy this property.
Go buy this," because he was tired of dealing with this guy.
Okay,
and he could trust me.
Yeah,
we had been doing business for, at that time, I guess 5 years.
He's like, just get this headache out.
Just get this headache away from me. So I took that headache on, and I tore, so I closed. So I went to in order to buy the mobile home park, in 4 months, I went to 15 banks. I was relentless to get financing to close on this mobile home park. And after 14 no's, I finally got a yes. And it was like from M&T Bank. And after I closed on the deal, they actually went belly up. So it was interesting. No, it wasn't M&T Bank. M&T Bank actually took over the note. But so I was really persistent in order to get this first deal done. And actually, fast forward to now, that was 2007. It's 2025. Now that the park is a little bit bigger, I won't say how much, but it's bigger. And it's just printing money, and this other deal was a retail center. And I actually wanted to grow a portfolio of retail centers. So it really fit it well into my vision. And I'm still working full time back then, right? I'm working full time, and this building, I wanted to tear it apart because it had small, narrow windows in front. I wanted to tear it apart, build big glass, a real storefront kind of rebuild the whole front. So I wound up doing all the architectural work myself, all the design work myself. And on, just on the weekends, tore that building apart. I mean, it was a major project, and I wound up closing the like 1 day apart. Like I think it was like January 17th of 2008. I closed the retail center on the 18th. The next day, I closed the mobile home park, and I remember sitting on the sidewalk of this retail center, and I'm like writing my first process to collect rent. I'm like,
from the mobile home park?
From the mobile home park, because like it's all cash. It was bringing in like $6,000 of cash at that time, and I like, okay, I don't want to collect the rent, right? I mean, I'm not. This one, like, one commitment I'm going to make to myself, I'm not going to collect the rent ever. I'm just not going to do that. With the single family homes, I gave them my account information, and it's just starting to where they had digital banking, and you could see the deposits. Like you can open up and you can see an image of the deposit. This was kind of new. And so I made the tenants that I had to pay their rent to my bank account. That way if I didn't receive the money in the account, then I would know to go collect or, do an eviction process or whatever. So
I love this. I'm not going to collect the rent.
They're not going to collect rent. So I wrote a process, developed a spreadsheet, and I could have looked for software, but I Googled, like mobile home park management service company. And the only thing that came up in the country was an inspection process in California for appliances in a mobile home, in a manufactured house. Like how you can't have an appliance on the patio or something like that. I mean,
yeah.
And
makes sense.
Sorry?
I said, yeah.
Makes sense.
And so I had to write my own processes and that's how kind of the beginning of Park Nation was then, sitting there on that sidewalk, writing out a process to hold the residents accountable, the managers accountable, and the bank. You'd be surprised how many times bankers would make mistakes. Yeah. I remember having the receipt for the deposit, but the cash never showed up in my account. So I had to take the receipt back to the bank and say, hey, you got to credit my account. And luckily I had that receipt, Wow. And so the processes work. Having proven processes you have to be able to scale a business. And so I closed my first mobile home park and my first retail center, like almost simultaneously. And I had borrowed like $180,000 from Alice at that time for the down payment. It was like $185,000 promissory note that I did at 10%. And I can't remember the terms, but it actually, worked out very well, and then I started buying more mobile home parks. Like they would come to me. Like the next deal I did was as a great community. It was the suburban mobile home park over on the northwest side of town off of FM 521. It was like 48 spaces, on 8 acres, or I can't remember the acreage, but I mean, that park today, these parks are, where else can you go and pay rent for $600 or $700? If you own your own home and it's paid off, which a lot of these guys do, that's all they pay in rent. It's a really good deal.
$600 or $700, yeah.
And so, and then I bought another park, and then I bought another park, and
so the mobile home parks continued. You still own that first one. Yeah. What about the retail center? You still own that one?
Well, I bought the retail center, and I did redeveloped it, got it leased up, restructured debt. I brought in some new partners. I did my first partnership with one of the guys I work with. He was a project manager at the company that I was consulting for.
The guy that was helping you put coffee on your desk?
No. No, this guy was an older gentleman that was a mechanical engineer, project manager, and he was very interested in getting involved with real estate. His wife had some cash, some extra money, and so he wound up putting some money in this retail center and helped me restructure debt. And we set up my first, not joint venture, but an LLC where there's minority members.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that was a good learning lesson. And then I started buying parks. Like parks would just come to me, and I started buying, and it was very creative, lots of creative deals, because you could not get financing back then, traditional financing from banks, because they looked at a mobile home park as a special use property, and they didn't look at it that had infrastructure, that had value, that
cash flow, and
the cash wasn't consistent. They didn't look at that as consistent, and they're looking at more of a brick and mortar stuff.
Yeah,
and so most of the deals that I was doing were very creative. Like in 2011, I bought a park in south of Kemah in Bay Cliff. And it was a small park. It was like 24 spaces, and the guy wanted $325,000 for it. And so I called the broker up, and I said, I'm going to make an offer, a seller financed offer. And she hung up on me. What? So I call her back. And this lady is amazing. She turned out to be such an amazing person. And she was in League City. And I called her back. I said, look, I'm going to give you an offer I'm going to put a $50,000 down, and I'm going to seller finance the rest. And so I wrote an LOI up and sent it over to her. And she just ignored it. So then I wrote another, and I said, okay, I'm going to give you $100,000. And so when she got the second LOI with the $100,000 down payment, she called me and said, hey, I think I can help you, and I think I have an investor for you. So come down and meet me. And so I drove down to League City, and I wound up making a deal where one of her relatives put the money up to because to
buy the park,
to buy the property.
Yeah.
And I was like again, you're very determined about something and you won't take no for an answer, then a lot of times, you're wrestling and something will come up or show up just when you need it.
Your universe, like you said, just
that's a beautiful thing about
you. Yeah.
I really think that doing business is like a creative process, and I think as a human being we're created to create.
Yeah.
And so business is like, and I always tell the accounting girls this, like, business is not just science, it's art also. It's art and a science. And so you're a creative process doing these deals. And so we worked up a contract, and with her relative putting up the down payment, and then she calls me and she said, hey, guess what? And because I would always send the amortization table with my offers. And when a buyer actually looks at that thing and sees how much money they're going to make on interest, they start thinking, ching, 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 ching.
Sure.
So this guy, this Hispanic seller that couldn't speak English, finally clicked. And she calls me and says, he wants to seller finance the deal. I said, I told you. And so and this was like 2010, I think, the end of 2010. And so she drove up to Houston and redid the contract, did it for the contract, and we wound up closing that deal. And it was a seller finance deal, and I borrowed $100,000 from Alice
again,
because I kept returning the money.
Yeah,
right?
So she loved it.
And then I said, Marie, I don't want to lose this opportunity to work with your relative. And within a couple of months, within 30 days, I got a call from another broker friend of mine that I've been doing business with, and I want to mention names, but I don't think I should. So This guy's like, look, I got this property in Channelview that, and so I said, well, let me take a look. It was a 34 space mobile home park, and they wanted $275,000 cash. And so I wound up calling up Marie, and so she came up the next day on a Sunday and said, okay, let's do a deal. So I borrowed the entire amount from her, and we did that. We bought, with no cash out of my own pocket, no money out of my own pocket.
Wild.
Almost all these communities I've done, I purchased with no money out of my own pocket.
It's amazing.
And I did a lot of times. I'll do an 18-month promissory note with a 12-month extension. And at that time, I had several notes that were maturing in 2012. And luckily, my mortgage broker had went back to work, I think for Sterling Bank at that time, and they started lending on mobile home parks.
just in the nick of time.
No, it wasn't. It was Mid-South Bank, which is now some other bank.
Yeah.
And so I started doing multiple deals, getting like 5.25 or 5.5 rate on a 15 or 20 year AM. And I restructured debt, for all of these communities that were seller financed.
Crazy. Okay, we've got about like 6.5 minutes left in our show. I got to ask you this: when you're looking at a mobile home park to acquire, what is your formula that you're using to look at it and say, okay, is this a good deal or not?
Well, I think one of those things is, fit into our current portfolio, and can operations take it on and be successful with it? I mean, it's got to be able to work in our current portfolio, or in another market where the park has to be big enough in order to not overburden that community with the labor. So we typically have one manager. One of the secret sauces that we have is, we're an independent premier mobile home and RV park management service business. And so when, like a lot of these operators there, they have managers and they may have multiple entities, and that manager may be getting multiple checks every payroll. We bill, on a weighted percentage, based on what that person is managing. So we have 7 communities in the Galveston area, and one manager is managing all of them, from one area office with, 1 or 2 maintenance techs. So it really depends. Like if we go into a new market, it's got to be big enough that it can handle the load of, one full-time manager and at least 1 maintenance tech. So that's key.
So it'd have to be big enough to be able to handle that, yeah? Yeah,
which is, at least 75 to 80 spaces, if not 100 spaces. And the second thing is market. I've made a lot of mistakes getting into tertiary markets without the demand and without people buying manufactured homes, or not having the dealerships in that market area to where they're selling homes and filling the community in. So you have to be very careful when you're buying a community. The market has to have a demand. If you can't fill the community up, then I would run. And I should have run, but I haven't in the past. And so I've learned my lesson about that. So, I'm like looking at communities in Northern California right now, and I've actually got one. I'm waiting on a contract right now on a 90 plus, like 92 space RV park. But I'm the only reason that I'm really going after it hard is because I know the market. It's right off of a main thoroughfare through Northern California and I know the market. So I'm very confident we can fill the community up. So that's a really key, is looking at, doing a market survey and understanding what the market is. That would be the second most important thing, I think. Can you manage it, and can you fill it up? And then, there's other obstacles, like what's there. Is it, of course, the sewer system's very important. Water, I run from rent control, or there's certain restrictions. You got to look at the municipality and see how they feel and how they think about mobile home communities, because a lot of times, they'll change their ordinances in live time and kill your business. Like the city of Texas City, they have no zoning for mobile home parks. They have ordinances for mobile home parks in their city, but they don't have zoning. And there's 6 communities in that city, the city limits. In our community, we have a 54 space park down there, and it was built in the 80s. I've got evidence of that. In the 90s, they changed the zoning to, like 1998, they changed the zoning to multifamily, and the new city manager and city inspector decides all of a sudden in 2024 to begin to enforce an ordinance or a zoning issue that's from 1998, as we're operating for all these years. And so you have to really know what your city ordinances are, like the setbacks. Like if there's side-to-side setbacks and you have an older community that doesn't meet those setbacks and you pull a home out, a lot of times you'll lose a space. Yeah. So you got to look at all those little details and make sure that it fits into your plan. But the most important thing is being able to pay the debt service. It's like whatever your deal structure is, if it's not being underwritten by the brokers, and I think this is the most important thing for this industry, for this market, for all investors, all owners, and all the brokers out there, you have to underwrite deals based on existing cash flow, and it's got to meet a 1.25 DSCR. If it doesn't, stay away from the deal. As if you're an investor, especially if you know what you're doing, if it doesn't underwrite at that DSCR, then run from it. Because a lot in the last probably 7 or 8 years, brokers have come into this space and they underwrite deals based on their idea what the pro forma should be. not that they've ever ran or operated a park or even know. And so, we've moved into certain states where they're still underwriting based on existing cash flow, which is key in my opinion, in this space.
They've muddied the waters. Well, Tim, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, man, and we've enjoyed the heck out of it. If somebody wants to get a hold of you and learn more about Park Nation coming and managing their parks, or just learn more about mobile home park management, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, you can go to our website, parknation.us, or you can call us, or you can email me at timpikey@parknation.us. That would probably be the best way.
Cool. How do you spell your last name?
It's TIMPIKEY at parknation, all one word, .us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
We enjoyed the heck out of it. So
I hope so.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's fun.
All right. Thanks.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you very much.